Look at my new mechanical pencils. They're all like pastel. I love them. What does Amazon have in common with the water cycle? Both of these are patterns or systems or forces in our world that are bigger than us, that we depend on, and in which we live and move and have our being, sort of whether we like it or not. And both of these forces, or you could call them spirits, angels, gods with a lowercase g, egregores. Bruno Latour refers to them as like liens, like links that we depend on. Both of these forces can either be a blessing to us, can put us into a healthy web of connections and give us good gifts and maintain us as who we are, whether that be drinking water or actually these very pencils. Or they could turn against us, so to speak, and be forces that control and limit and kill. Say there's a flood or a drought, or say Amazon, you work for them and they're mistreating you, or they eventually take over the world, or whatever's going to happen with Amazon. And in one of the Symbolic World videos, somebody was using the imagery of like being in the belly of the beast and like being swallowed by this force and entity that has its own purpose that is kind of beyond or can be at odds with ours. But being swallowed by it and integrated into it for its own ends, in a sense. And people like to, or we often would demonize, well, literally, demonize like Amazon or like corporations and capitalism and, government control and the big evil forces, in our day. But the same thing has always been going on. I mean, it's the same pattern, isn't it, as with, like, again, the water cycle. Especially if you're in a pre-modern age where you're very much dependent on nature and the rain. So these would be considered principalities, or gods, or angels, and they could be fallen angels. And they could be for good or evil, but we're attached to them, and they're attached to us. And what we want is to be in symbiosis with these forces and powers or principalities, and for them to be in symbiosis with us, essentially. And this is one way to look at what Jonathan Pageau was talking about like what is heaven. I think it's a response to like that atheist who was talking about, well, heaven isn't literally up there, but he said how heaven is this realm, that the water cycle and Amazon and, a king or a president or like, those entities would live in. It's the principalities, it's the ordering patterns or forces in the universe. And in Christian terms, in Christian terms, how this sort of harmonizing is expressed is like by Christ or the Logos ascending, right, through all of those principalities and through the heavens to get the very highest seat, so that as he says, all power is given to me in heaven or in earth. So Christ, who shares our heart, we're integrated into him, and he loves and cares for us, ascends through all of these principalities and takes the highest seat above them all, so that he becomes the uppermost or the most deep organizing principle of all. And well, you can't really put it temporally because this is something that doesn't happen in like linear chronological time. But where we want to get to, right? And in a sense, the underlying reality or the future, or however you want to put it, what we're working towards is where this is the reality that I experience, where heaven and earth and everything in them, and every force in them, I experience it as the hand of God essentially, as my love or lover, as, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. All things are mine, and I am Christ, and Christ is God's. All things work together for good. Anything or force that touches me is experienced never as like an alien or killing. Pierre Teilhard also talks about this in a more abstract sense, about a killing or alien force, of somebody taking over the world and using it for money, or a flood or a drought. But it's always experienced as the hand of God. And I'm just hesitating because people have different concepts of God, and too many people, God is himself or themselves one of these alien forces that's really domineering and controlling, and that's not really much better. And one way of getting there, so to speak, or perceiving that, or experiencing that, because a lot of it has to do with perspective, rather than an outward shift in the factual nature of things. And I'm reading this book on the divine feminine and biblical wisdom literature. So the wisdom literature talks about Sophia and the figure of, or Chokhmah in Hebrew, but the figure of wisdom, which wisdom is another way to put this whole pattern, of the logos through all of the principalities, to where wisdom is the principal pattern, the most underlying pattern by which things and forces organize themselves. And when you can perceive her and be in tune with her, the world starts to be perceived this way, rather than as being swallowed by one or another.